He just wanted to play basketball. But at 12 years old and 6'6", so the HOA labeled him a threat. Led by Karen, the board tried to turn his height into a crime, hiding prejudice behind fake safety rules. But Jackson stood tall, walked into their meeting, and with one calm voice, shattered their silence. And just wait until you see the shocking twist that followed, and how justice finally took the spotlight. It started like any other Saturday, in the kind of suburban neighborhood where hedges are trimmed with ruler precision and mailboxes get polished before church. The sun had barely peeled itself over the rooftops, the sky still wearing that sleepy gray-blue robe. Amy was in hers too. Plaid cotton, a little frayed at the cuffs. One of those "I haven't had coffee yet, so proceed at your own risk" kind of looks. She stood by the kitchen sink, hands wrapped around an empty mug, staring out at nothing, waiting for the kettle to scream. The house was quiet, the kind of peaceful quiet you don't notice until it's broken. And broken it was by 3 sharp, perfectly spaced knocks on the front door. Non-patient, not friendly, just official. The kind of knock that makes your heart stutter for reasons you can't explain. The kind of knock that assumes it has the right to interrupt whatever life you're living. Before Amy could so much as blink, Jackson was already moving. Barefoot, 6'6", 12 years old. Built like a teenage linebacker, but with the expression of a Buddhist monk who's seen too much. His footfalls were soft against the hardwood, but his presence thunder. He moved with the silent certainty of a lion who knows the gazelle is already too late. Amy didn't say anything. She just watched from the kitchen as her son moved toward the door, rubbing sleep from his eyes, wearing a faded Jurassic Park t-shirt that barely fit anymore and gray sweatpants threatening to become capri. He opened the door and there they were, Karen and Rick, the dynamic duo of the HOA board, armed to the teeth with clipboards and carefully rehearsed passive aggression. Karen stood slightly in front, her plastic smile pulling too tight at the corners, like her face was trying to hide the soul behind it. Rick, standing just behind her like a henchman who never got promoted, nodded stiffly but avoided eye contact. Karen squinted up at Jackson. She had to tilt her head back a little, just enough to remind her who was towering over her. But that didn't stop her from doing what people like her always do when they feel small, pretending they're not. "We need to speak with the adult," she said, each word clipped and rehearsed, as if she'd practiced it in the mirror that morning while smoothing her already smoothed hair. Jackson blinked once. No change in expression, no raised brow, just that deadpan calm he'd learned from a year of being stared at like an anomaly. Then, in that voice, that low, rumbling voice that somehow dropped 2 octaves during 6th grade, he replied, "I am the adult." No sass, no smile, just fact. Karen froze. There was a moment, for no longer than a second, where you could see her entire mental operating system crash and reboot behind her eyes. Rick coughed softly, the universal male signal for abort. "This is above my pay grade." He stepped half a step back. Amy finally made her way to the doorframe, half curious, half furious. She could already smell whatever HOA-flavored nonsense they'd cooked up this time. She looked at her son, standing tall and still, and then at Karen, who suddenly found something fascinating about her clipboard. "Can I help you?" Amy asked. Not rude, not friendly, just tired of this game. Karen adjusted her blouse, regaining composure like a cat pretending it meant to fall. "Yes," she said with a voice dipped in syrup but poisoned underneath. "We're here about your son. There's been complaints." "Complaints?" Amy repeated, her tone flat as Kansas. Karen gave a tight smile, the kind that's legally required by HOA board members. "Yes. Some of the neighbors have expressed concern about his presence." "Presence?" Amy echoed again, this time with just enough venom to be noticed. Jackson hadn't moved. Not a twitch. But Amy saw it, his fingers just a little flex, a barely there clench, like his body knew something his brain hadn't said out loud yet. And that was it. That was the moment. Not a scream, not a shove, not even a raised voice. Just a mother, a son, 2 board members, and an accusation wrapped in pleasantries. That was the start of it all. The war they didn't ask for. The fight they didn't start. But the one they sure as hell were going to finish. That same afternoon, the envelope came. Slid halfway into the mailbox like it was ashamed to be there. No return address, but the letterhead said it all. Gold embossed HOA seal. Smug and sterile. Amy ripped it open on the porch. A single page typed. Formal. Cold. Your son intimidates neighbors. Children are afraid. Adults feel unsafe. Unsafe. She read it twice. 3 times, as if that might make it sound less insane. But the words stayed the same. Black ink pressing into her chest like a brick. Intimidating Jackson. The same boy who cried last week watching a Pixar movie. The same kid who still slept with the light on when it thundered. He was tall. That was it. Tall and quiet and 12. But apparently, in this neighborhood, that was enough. By 3 p.m., Amy was in the HOA office, a converted storage room behind the community pool that smelled like old carpet and unwashed rules. She sat in a plastic chair across from Karen, who looked like she was auditioning for the role of Southern mother with opinions. Pearl necklace, matching earrings, and that classic look of concern that always seemed 2 seconds from condescension. Karen clutched her necklace like Jackson had rolled up blasting heavy metal and spitting on hydrangeas. "We've had several reports," she began, voice soft like fresh linen, "about your son." Amy said nothing. Karen continued. "People say he's imposing." Amy tilted her head. "Imposing how?" Karen smiled, like she was trying to sell poison as perfume. "It's not that he does anything wrong. He doesn't speak out of turn. He's never damaged property. But it's his presence." Amy raised an eyebrow. "Presence." Karen nodded solemnly. "The way he stares, the way he walks, there's a certain aggressiveness." Amy's hands curled into fists on her lap. "You mean the way he exists?" Karen blinked, caught, but she didn't back down. "There's a difference," she said slowly, "between growing and looming." Amy's breath caught. Something dark flashed in her eyes. "You know," she said, standing, voice calm but vibrating with fury, "there's also a difference between parenting and profiling." Karen's mouth opened slightly, like she wanted to say something clever, but found nothing. Amy didn't wait. She walked out. No slamming doors, no shouting. Just the sound of her heels tapping down the hallway like a warning shot. When she got home, the house smelled like spaghetti and basil and the last traces of normalcy. Jackson was already at the table, fork in hand, but not moving. His back was straight, shoulders a little too stiff, eyes locked on the wall like he was waiting for a verdict. Amy sat across from him, setting down her phone without looking at it. He didn't speak for a while, just poked at his plate, pushed a meatball aside, twirled spaghetti into a loose, uncommitted knot. Then he said it. Quiet. Too quiet. "Mom, do you think I scare people just by being me?" Amy felt her chest crack open like someone had taken that formal complaint letter and jammed it between her ribs. She swallowed hard. "Why do you ask that?" He shrugged, still not looking at her. Mr. Pierce crossed the street when I walked home today, and Mrs. White closed her blinds when I waved." Amy didn't respond. "Because what do you say? What do you say when your 12-year-old has to process being treated like a threat before he's even had his first kiss? What do you say when the world decides he's too much, too big, too quiet, too there, to be a child?" So she got up, circled the table, and wrapped her arms around him from behind. He didn't move at first, then slowly leaned back into her chest. "You scare narrow-minded people," she whispered. "But not because of who you are, because of how little they are." He didn't answer, but she felt his shoulders ease. Just a little. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. 3 days later, the mailbox coughed up something new. A single sheet of paper. No envelope, no stamp, no name. Just bold black letters screaming across the top like someone had run out of sanity and toner at the same time. Children over 5 feet 10 inches must be accompanied by an adult while using common areas. No logo, no signature. Just policy by passive aggression. Amy stood on the porch, staring at it, coffee sloshing in her mug, mouth half open in that "is this a joke, or did I actually slip into satire" kind of way. She chuckled once. Then again louder. Then the laugh died in her throat as the reality settled in like a pit in her stomach. They were serious. They had actually typed this, printed it, distributed it. Someone, maybe Karen, maybe Rick, maybe one of the other clipboard commandos, had sat in front of a laptop and thought, "Yeah, this sounds reasonable. Let's ban tall children from existing in peace." That evening, Jackson didn't say much during dinner. He was quiet, which wasn't unusual these days. His appetite had started to shrink. A cruel irony for a boy whose body seemed determined to grow no matter what the world threw at it. After the dishes were cleared and the sun dipped low, he grabbed his basketball. No words, just grabbed it, laced up his shoes, and nodded at Amy before heading out. She watched from the window, heart in her throat. He just wanted to shoot hoops. Just wanted 1 hour where gravity and rhythm mattered more than stares and policy memos. 10 minutes later, the door creaked open again. Jackson stepped inside alone. No sweat on his forehead, no lightness in his step. Just red eyes. Amy stood before he even reached the couch. What happened? He sat down slowly, as if even that felt like too much. Mr. Pierce told me I couldn't play without a parent present. Amy blinked. I said I'm 12. He said rules are rules. Then he just pointed at the sign and walked away. Amy's pulse spiked. What sign? He didn't answer, just stared at the floor, like maybe it held a better version of this universe. She didn't change shoes. Didn't grab her phone. She just stormed out the door and marched to the court like a woman on trial who'd already accepted the guilty verdict, but came to flip the table anyway. The court was empty. Pierce was gone, of course. But the sign, the sign was there. Laminated, zip-tied to the gate. Clean, shiny, and smug as hell. No unsupervised youth over 5 feet 10 inches. Not unruly youth. Not vandalizing youth. Not youth causing disturbances, lighting things on fire, or tagging fences. Just tall kids. Too tall to blend in. Too tall to ignore. Too tall to be mistaken for anything but a threat in khaki-colored suburbia. Amy stood there, reading it again and again until the letters started to blur. Not from tears, not yet, but from rage pressing against the back of her eyes like a migraine. She pulled out her phone, took a picture. Then another. Close-up. Wide shot. Different angles like she was documenting a crime scene. Because that's exactly what it was. When she got home, Jackson was still on the couch. He hadn't moved. Remote untouched. Lights off. Just sitting there like a statue carved from injustice. He didn't say a word. Didn't need to. His silence said more than any outburst ever could. It said, I'm used to this now. It said, this is what happens when you're born too big and too quiet in a world that only forgives loudness when it's white and familiar. Amy sat beside him. Didn't speak. Didn't ask him to eat or play or smile. She just placed a hand on his shoulder and stayed there. The air between them was heavy. Not just with what had happened, but with what was coming. Because Amy knew this wasn't the end. No, this was a declaration. And they had just been drafted into a war neither of them wanted. But both were damn ready to fight. Amy showed up to the monthly HOA meeting with fire in her chest and steel in her spine. No makeup, no earrings, just a plain navy cardigan, jeans, and that expression mothers where when diplomacy is dead and only dignity remains. She brought Jackson with her. No warning, no RSVP, no chance to lock the doors. They walked into the clubhouse at 6:58 p.m. 2 minutes early. Just enough time to watch every head in the room turn like a synchronized dance of judgment. A dozen chairs in a circle. Fold-out table. Coffee urns still dripping. Clipboards and laps. Fake smiles freshly ironed. And then Jackson ducked under the door frame. Literally. The ceiling was too low for him to walk in upright, his 6 feet 6 inches frame folded slightly as he entered, his curls brushing the molding. The room, once humming with passive-aggressive murmurs, fell into total silence. Not polite silence. Not let's wait and see silence. But the kind of hush that happens when someone walks into a courtroom and everyone realizes they've already lost the case. Karen stood up immediately. This is a private board meeting, she said, voice sharp, almost triumphant, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. Amy didn't flinch. He's 12, she said evenly, not even bothering to raise her voice. And he's here to respond to the complaints made about him. Karen blinked twice. Her eyes darted to the others, seeking backup. Rick looked down at his hands. Marjorie fiddled with her glasses. No one spoke. Karen straightened her shoulders. This isn't personal. Amy gave a short laugh. Not amused, incredulous. But before she could answer, Jackson stepped forward. Not rushed, not dramatic, just a single deliberate step. All eyes shifted to him. He stood in the middle of the room, taller than every man there, yet somehow smaller than the weight pressing down on his chest. His voice, when he finally spoke, was low and calm. Not shaky, not angry, just certain. If it's not personal, he asked, looking directly at Karen, then why does every rule feel aimed at me? No one answered. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came. Jackson didn't wait. You say it's about safety, about behavior, but I've never broken a rule. I've never been late to class. I hold the door for strangers. I say thank you to the mailman. He turned to Rick now. But you still look at me like I'm dangerous. Rick squirmed, his hand running across the back of his neck. It's about optics. Jackson tilted his head, like he'd heard the word 100 times before, but never believed it meant anything. You mean the way I look? He didn't ask. He said it. Then he looked back at the whole room. You're not scared of what I've done. You're scared of how I look, of my height, of my voice, of my skin. Silence. Jackson didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. He didn't ask for understanding. He just stood there, still tall, unapologetic. That's not HOA, he said. That's prejudice. You could hear a pin drop. The kind of silence that comes after someone tells the truth so plainly, so surgically, there's no room for rebuttal. Just shame. Amy stood behind him. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her son had just burned the room down without raising his voice. And all the board members could do was sit in the ashes and stare at their clipboards, suddenly too heavy to hold. Jackson's speech didn't end with silence. Not really, because silence in this case wasn't the end. It was just the inhale before the roar. From the very back of the room, behind the dusty folding chairs and the stack of untouched HOA newsletters, sat Mrs. Hernandez. 72 years old. Cardigan buttoned to the top, purse in her lap like armor. Sharp eyes. Her grandson Mateo, same age as Jackson, half his size, had spent the last 2 years being politely ignored at every community cookout, every Easter egg hunt, every holiday event the HOA used to pat itself on the back. She'd noticed. She always noticed. And so that night, when Jackson spoke, when his voice cut through years of silence like a blade through rotting wallpaper, Mrs. Hernandez pulled out her phone. She didn't say a word. She just hit record. 12 minutes. No edits. No fancy captions. Just truth in real time. She posted the video that night. Didn't tag anyone. Didn't need to. She titled it simply, 12-year-old boy confronts HOA for discrimination. And then she went to bed. By 2:30 a.m., the clip had 86,000 views. By 4 a.m., it was on Twitter's trending list. By 7:15 a.m., Amy woke up to 17 unread texts, 3 missed calls, and the unmistakable hum of a news van idling outside her lawn. It wasn't just local either. CNN picked it up. So did NBC, BuzzFeed, and one particularly angry TikToker with 2.3 million followers who paused mid-makeup tutorial to say, "You're telling me this baby man got profiled by a homeowners association? Jail. For everyone. Immediately." By 9 a.m., the cul-de-sac looked like a press conference. Reporters milled around like ants on a dropped popsicle. Microphones. Boom mics. Foldable chairs. One woman tried to film an interview in front of Jackson's house until Amy politely told her to leave or lose a kneecap. Politely. With a smile. Inside the clubhouse, the HOA scrambled. Emails flew. Karen called an emergency optic session. Rick paced a hole into the carpet. They drafted a joint statement in record time, full of soft apologies and hard deflections. We regret any misunderstanding that may have occurred. Jackson may have misinterpreted the intention behind the rule. The HOA is committed to fostering an inclusive and welcoming community. Translation: please stop tagging us in things. Please stop calling our office. Please God, don't cancel my Peloton account. But it was too late. Because 3 hours after their statement hit inboxes, someone anonymous, determined, and very, very petty leaked the internal emails. All of them. Dozens of threads. Time-stamped. Unfiltered. Including one from Karen herself, sent just 4 days before the sign went up. The subject line, that giant kid. And the message, the boy is just too big. Makes the cul-de-sac feel unsafe. It's not appropriate for children to be that size. We need a policy in place before someone gets spooked. No punctuation. No shame. Just raw fear pretending to be authority. The internet had a field day. Tweets turned into threads. Threads turned into op-eds. Prejudice disguised as policy, read one headline. Asterisk too tall to be a child, read another. But the best one, Jackson, 66, 12 years old, and the HOA's worst nightmare. It was on a t-shirt within 24 hours. By that point, it wasn't just HOA members hiding behind misunderstandings. It was a neighborhood exposed, a system cracked wide open by a boy who refused to shrink. And now the world was watching. The cameras weren't going anywhere. Neither was the truth, and neither, most definitely, was Jackson. Karen resigned. No tears, no speech, just a 2-line email at dawn. Effective immediately, I'll be stepping back to focus on personal matters. Translation: internet backlash hit harder than expected. Rick took a sabbatical, as in disappeared without a trace. Probably somewhere quiet, where HOA drama doesn't make national headlines. Mr. Pierce deleted everything. Facebook, Nextdoor, even LinkedIn. No goodbye post, no explanation, just digital dust where once stood a man who zip-tied signs about tall kids being a danger to society. The rest of the HOA tried to save face. Called an emergency vote to limit press involvement, suggested banning cameras at neighborhood events, drafted something called a community image preservation clause. No one cared. No one showed up. Their clipboards suddenly looked flimsy. Their rules laughable. Meanwhile, Amy's phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Civil rights groups, school board members, education journalists, even a well-known law firm called to say, "We'll take the case. No fee." And Jackson? He kept it simple. When asked to speak on a community panel, he shook his head. "I don't need a mic. I just want to walk to the damn pool." Amy almost laughed. Almost. But it wasn't funny. It was clarity, pure and sharp. Her son wasn't crushed. He hadn't cracked under the weight of all the stares, the policies, the manufactured fear. He had solidified, not hardened, not closed off, just centered. Steady like steel cooled in fire. He didn't want fame. He didn't want revenge. He didn't even want to go viral. He just wanted to exist, without being viewed as a threat. And that, Amy realized, was power. Not in shouting. Not in fighting. In refusing to disappear. In walking through a door and making the room fall silent. Not from fear, but from the sudden presence of truth. That night, Jackson passed by her in the hallway, basketball in hand. "Mom. Yeah. Thanks for letting me be me." Amy smiled. "Wasn't a favor. That's your right." And for the first time in a long time, she saw peace in his eyes. Real peace. The kind that comes when the world finally sees you, and you stop needing permission to stand tall. A month later, the vote passed. It wasn't loud. No confetti. No marching band. Just a quiet majority, a few cleared throats, and the rustle of papers that had finally been rewritten. The new HOA charter rolled out with less drama than expected. The people who once bristled at change now shrugged and nodded as if they'd always meant to do the right thing, just hadn't gotten around to it. Gone were the vague phrases. Gone were the codes disguised as concerns. No more unaccompanied youth over 5 feet 10 inches. No more visual safety disruptions. No more monitoring policy for non-conforming minors. In their place was a single, clear clause. No member of this community shall be profiled, restricted, or otherwise targeted based on physical appearance, including but not limited to height, build, skin color, voice, or perceived maturity. They called it Jackson's Clause, officially. It was in the minutes. In the charter. On the record. Typed in bold. Just like the rule that once told him he needed an escort to shoot hoops. Except now it stood for something else. A week later, the neighborhood held a block party. Nothing fancy. Folding tables. Lemonade. String lights hanging from garage gutters. Kids ran wild between sprinklers and snack tables. Music spilled from Bluetooth speakers. Someone grilled burgers. Someone else brought cupcakes. For the first time in a long time, the cul-de-sac felt like it was breathing. And Jackson? He played basketball with the other kids. No clipboard watchers. No laminated warnings. No HOA reps peeking from behind blinds with notepads in suspicion. Just sneakers on pavement. Laughter in the air. A 12-year-old boy flying down the court like the weight on his back had finally cracked and fallen off. Amy stood by the punch table. Paper plate in one hand. Plastic cup in the other. She wasn't watching the adults. Not their awkward smiles or their "we supported you the whole time" small talk. She watched her son. Mrs. Hernandez found her there, out of the way, half in the shade. She gave Amy a soft smile and pulled her into a gentle hug. The kind that doesn't say sorry or congrats. Just "I see you." Then she whispered, "Your boy did what grown men couldn't." Amy didn't answer right away. She just looked at the court where Jackson had just sunk a three-pointer and was now being high-fived by 3 kids who barely reached his shoulder. He laughed. Not politely. Not cautiously. But fully. That laugh, careless, bright, absolutely unafraid, rang out across the pavement like a song that had been trapped too long in silence. It was the first time Amy had heard it in weeks. And in that moment, she didn't think about the meetings. Or the headlines. Or the late-night emails. Or the rules she had fought to erase. She just smiled, because the only thing that mattered now was that her son, her tall, gentle, brilliant son, wasn't hiding anymore. He wasn't shrinking. He wasn't apologizing. He was exactly where he belonged. And finally, he knew it. 2 months later, there was another knock. Same door. Same porch. Same early morning light. But everything else different. Amy was in the kitchen again, just like that morning months ago. The kettle whistled softly. Sunlight curled across the counter. But her heart didn't race this time. Her hands didn't tremble around the coffee mug. No dread. No anticipation. Just another day in a home that finally felt like home again. And Jackson? He was already at the door. He didn't rush. Didn't hesitate. Just walked there, calm, deliberate. The way someone does when they no longer feel like they're trespassing in their own life. He opened the door. A new face waited on the other side. Early 20s. Polo shirt with a name tag. Nervous smile. Thin clipboard tucked under one arm like it might bite. "Hi," the young man said. "I'm with the HOA, just doing a round of welcome check-ins." Jackson nodded once. The rep glanced at his sheet. "We were hoping to speak with the adult of the household." It wasn't malicious. It wasn't loaded. Just a question from someone who hadn't read the last chapter. Jackson looked him directly in the eyes. No smirk, no pause, no emotion wore in his armor. Just truth. "I am," he said. And this time it wasn't a defense. It wasn't resistance. It was a fact. Simple. Final. Undeniable. The HOA rep blinked, processed. Something shifted behind his eyes. A quick flicker of realization, of context catching up. Then he nodded, almost respectfully, and stammered something about no worries and have a good day. Jackson closed the door gently. No slamming, no storm, just peace. He turned, walked back toward the kitchen, and passed his mother with a quiet glance. Amy didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Her eyes followed him, not with concern, not with pride, but with something deeper. Recognition. That was no longer a boy who looked like a man. That was a young man who knew who he was, who had walked through suspicion and silence and come out shaped, not shattered. Who had been forced to carry the weight of other people's fear and learned how to set it down without letting it break him. And maybe, just maybe, that weight had helped him stand taller. Amy turned back to the stove. The kettle clicked off. Outside, birds scattered from the power lines. The world kept spinning. But something fundamental had shifted. The community that once tried to shrink him had learned to stretch. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not all at once, but it had moved, bent, made room. And now, for the first time, the future didn't feel like a hallway lined with doors waiting to be slammed. It felt wide open. Exactly the right size for someone like Jackson to walk through.